Hi, this is Aaron Brooker, agronomist for Michigan and Northern Indiana, and just wanted to touch base on some early season field work. So I know we have some really good weather coming in this week and people are itching to get out into the fields, and just wanted to provide some recommendations and information around that. So first of all, I want to start off with tillage. So for a lot of my area, it'll be getting out into the fields, trying to get some of those tillage passes done, spring tillage. As I move south in the area and as we get down into northwest Indiana especially, it might turn into a little bit more planting. But starting off with tillage, first of all, a lot of us have been coming off of quite a bit of rain, especially as we move up into central Michigan. I really want to caution us, please don't push conditions in terms of that soil moisture too much on tillage. If we get out there and we've got clods forming with that tillage tool, it's really going to be difficult to overcome that this spring. So we're not going to be able to get rid of those clods. It's really going to make it for poor planting conditions if those soils are too wet when we're running that tillage equipment. So if soils are sitting a little bit wet still, especially some of these heavier natured soils that we've gotten a lot of rain, I would really recommend just waiting on those, making sure we get those drier conditions so we can set ourselves up for better planting. And then speaking of planting, for anybody that's thinking about getting out into the fields and planting, a couple of notes I want to hit on. So if we are getting out there, keep in mind it's beginning of April, so it definitely is on the early side of things. If we're going to plant anything, I'd rather see us plant beans before corn. A couple of reasons for that. So first of all, many years of PFR data have shown that beans stand to benefit from earlier planting a little bit more than corn. So every now and again, corn can see advantages with later planting, whereas beans, we typically always see those have an advantage from early planting. So the yield advantage is there with beans. And then also if we get into a situation where we see some poor emergence, see some stand loss, things like that with some cold spells here, beans are going to be able to take that a little bit better. So if emergence isn't quite uniform, if we don't have quite as many plants out there, beans are going to be able to compensate a little bit better than corn will. With corn, we really want that nice uniform stand to come up to drive that optimum yield potential. I also want to touch on soil moisture again with planting. Really want to be careful here that we're not planting into too wet of soils. It's definitely too early to be planting into conditions that aren't quite right, so we can definitely wait for some better conditions. So if it's too wet to be planting out there, I'd really like to see us wait on that. We can run into some compaction around that rooting zone when we run those planters in, compaction in that trench. It's really going to hurt our early season root growth and that early season plant. So I'd really like to see us wait if our conditions are a little bit too wet. There's no reason to be going out there right now and pushing things too much there. In terms of soil temperature, optimum temperature is going to be that 50-degree soil temperature. Obviously, this far north, we don't always get that when we're planting. That's just the optimum. But if we're sitting in those 30 and 40-degree soils, might not be time to get those beans in the ground, especially maybe not getting corn in the ground. So keep that in mind later in the season. If we've got to get things in, if it's a little bit cold, we can do that. But definitely not the time of year to be pushing things either on soil moisture or on soil temperature. Last, I want to take a look at the forecast. So we do have really nice conditions here till about Friday. And then when we get into Saturday and Sunday, it looks like temperatures are going to take another dip again. Highs maybe in the 40s and 50s, depending on where you're at. Lows back down into maybe the 30s and 40s, again, depending on how far north or south you are. Ideally, we're not going to be planting into those conditions, but also we need to think about the first 48 hours after planting. So when it gets to Friday and we get that seed in the ground, the next couple of days, that seed's going to experience some cooler conditions and potentially some cold rainfall. And that's where we tend to see our biggest issues with emergence issues, is when we get that cold rainfall or we get those cold temperature swings right after planting within that 24 to 48 hour period. So keep that in mind here toward the end of the week. If the forecast still looks like it's going to cool down a little bit, it might be time to put those planters away before we get to Friday, just to make sure we're not running into some of those issues. So if you have any further questions about field work, planting, anything like that, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to work with you. Thanks.